I don't know, am I supposed to say welcome back? um, so if anybody's new here, my name is Manisha. I'm currently in Boston, and one of the reasons why I'm vlogging is just to share bits and pieces of my life, of my internal world, that has helped me navigate my reality better, as well as helped me transform and blossom into a completely new person. And I think the last time I talked about my overall journey, right, what my journey has been till now, there are certain themes that I'd like to also delve into, because I think they hold a lot of significance as to why things in my life, or even in your life, are a certain way, and what you can do to actively deal with them. So the other day I was thinking about a submission I had, right? So I'm currently in a master's program, and I'm academically always been an academically inclined child. So I love studying, I love learning, I love expanding my knowledge. So I think at an assignment the other day, I was just trying to code. Now, and then trying to use a statistical program for my projects and my assignments, right? So it just got me, that moment that seems so mundane now, like this is something that I just do and I'm so used to it. I was just thinking about how easy it has gotten, and I just opened Facebook, and I had a 10-year anniversary picture of a photo I'd posted. I was looking at myself in that picture, and I was experiencing myself in the moment as a different person. I was absolutely awestruck, because it is so easy with the passage of time to forget who we used to be and who we have transformed into now. And sometimes I also take the liberty to forget what the journey was like. So growing up, I wasn't a very mathy person. Like, I had this inherent fear with anything related to numbers and math, right? And I do not know why, to almost like a year and a half back, I was like, oh, let's do quantitative research. Ha ha ha. And coming here, I was faced with a lot of those fears that I had very successfully in the 10th grade said goodbye to when I made the choice to pursue biology. I said there is no way I'm going to study math for 2 more years if I don't have to, and that I can just live off in this binary identity of someone who doesn't understand math and doesn't get all of these things and likes biology and is good at biology and good at understanding medicine, you know. So I've for anybody who does not know, so I've worked and I've trained as a physician, right? So I'm a doctor. So it felt really liberating to say, oh, I don't have to deal with that part of knowledge anymore, because I made a choice that exempts me from it, and I don't have to deal with the fear, right? Then I'm not a math person, that's fine. You just adopt that as your identity and go on with life, right? And it so happened that with growing understanding of how actually medicine functions and how do the treatment algorithms and how do we actually generate evidence to treat patients, I understood, okay, so there's someone out there who does experiments, who deals with numbers, and with the confidence in those numbers, I'm given these protocols that I'm right now trying to cram for my exam, and that the real beauty, the real magic lies in that process, because that process of formulating that protocol creates the magic, right? So I thought, why not delve into research? Not a problem. It's just research, right? I remember the first week I came here and I had classes in data science, and I was like, oh my god, what did I get myself into? Because all of these years, the very fears that I had suppressed, I did not deal with them, right? I accepted them as, this is who I am, and it's a fixed identity, and nothing would change that. I just have to accept that. I get a C or B, I don't even remember. What majorly I remember is that every time at the parent-teacher meets, I would have my parents go to the English teacher and she'll be like, oh, she's fine. The language teacher, well, sometimes her Hindi is a bit wonky, got better at that. The science teacher, oh, she's a wonderful student. And the biology teacher would always be in awe of me. I remember social science, like politics and geography, excellent. And I used to tremble when my mom and dad used to step towards the math teacher, because they would be like, we have to do something about Manisha. I know she can do better. And that was always the caveat, like, I know she can do better. She's not there yet. And I would be absolutely devastated and think that math is the most excruciatingly painful thing in the world, and as a intellectual child who had the skills to think for herself, right? So always kind of a rebellious kid, and I'd rebel in conformity, right? So I would do conventional things, but I would want to do them in a way that is very original to me, and it wouldn't make sense sometimes. Like, why are you doing that? Just for a little example is, so I took a very conventional career in medicine, right? A doctor was a big deal, like, that's what people in India do, right? Or that's what people anywhere in the world aspire to do, right? Becoming a physician, becoming a doctor, it's prestigious. A tech career, it's prestigious. So I took that conventional choice, but in med school I was like, I want to work on emotional intelligence and listening skills for medical school. That I went off in a completely different path of knowledge and creating projects and volunteering with organizations. I'll talk about that aspect in depth because it's a very exciting part of my life. But so I had that streak, that wish to always break through, but I didn't know how to channel it in a way that actually benefits others and myself very later in life, right? So coming back to the story, so I would just say that what's the use of math, I do not use math in my everyday life. I wake up, I go to school, I go to college, I come back, I study. Like, there's not much use of math in my life. But we often forget that the very things that are so mundane for us are a result of physics, maths, chemistry, brilliant minds putting their effort and making all of that accessible to us in such a beautiful way that we don't even realize that it took math for the door to be angled at a certain way so that it would open. It took math for the structuring of the bed that I very graciously sleep on while I crib at the end of the day. Like, I don't even know where math was used in, and it's there in plain sight, right? It's not like, oh, it's not there, but it's not obvious, it's not apparent. I kind of tend to think that if it's not apparent, it's not there, which is another rabbit hole down in itself. So while that was happening, that I was running away, just making through with that aspect of, my identity and my life. And life has a very funny way of working, right? What you kind of resist will come back. So when I found myself again interested in research, when I came to the US, and I found myself in a pickle because the very thing that I had been running from, anything that resembles math, anything that has numbers in it, was out here in my face as a skill I had to develop if I wanted to flourish in this new aspect of my career, right? How to analyze the data that I have, how to make sense of the numbers that I have. And for a really good part of my program in the starting, I would just sit and I would just have like a glazed look in my eye as I'm trying to understand, oh, what are they talking about? Oh, I'm supposed to nod and understand. And it was all internal, right? So it's not that intellectually I did not understand math, or intellectually or my mental capacities did not help me succeed, because even in school, after I remember a math teacher used to give me the advice that you don't forget to brush, right? So don't forget to do your math homework every day. It might take a bit of effort, like you don't forget to sleep and you don't forget to eat. Just make it a part of your everyday and you will be better. And there might be something in your life that you also feel resistance towards, and you have, with external feedback, you have kind of assumed an identity that this is something you cannot do. And the external feedback could be not a person always, okay? So it could be just a grade, or how you even feel during the process. I think that's also important, because a lot of people, when they talk about their passions and they talk about the work they do, they say that it feels so natural and it feels so easy, and you get into a state of flow that, it's there's no resistance and you want to do it. So even the process, if the process feels really, challenging, and you've kind of internalized the story that, okay, this is tough, this is a tough cookie to crack, and this is not something I want to do, I would encourage you to implore, not the object itself, right? So in in high school, my approach to the same problem, and even the feedback that we receive externally, is to put in more effort. While that is true, you do often have to put in more effort. There's nothing wrong with putting in more hours and more effort and trying to enhance a skill in a particular area or a part of your life. But again, the theme was more internal. So with the process not being linear, there became attached a sense of fear. Now, fear is a good thing and a bad thing, speaking from biology, right? So any fear helps our survival instincts to kick in, right? Our fight and flight system to kick in, and for us to be more alert and to take action. Literally the blood rushes to your skeletal muscles, and you're more aroused, and your sympathetic nervous system is just firing, and you're like, okay, I have a threat and I have to deal with it. But what happens is, um, we are not constantly supposed to be in that state, right? We're supposed to switch off, have a sense of relaxation as well. And then when fear comes up, that state switches on, right? So if you're on the pendulum on either side at all times, it's not good, it's not balanced, right? So with that sense of fear that got attached with the theme of numbers and math, what it did is, I was fine during high school, right? Kind of pushed through, powered through, put in more time trying to understand the math equation, took more tuitions, took more extra help, and that was the masculine aspect of, getting things done in a structured, disciplined way, putting in more effort, putting in more hours, and that makes sense. But often, what we forget to deal with is the internal stuff, right? Again, the theme of an internal transformation while you go on putting in that external effort into your outwardly reality and your outward world, right? So while I'm solving the math problem, am I taking into account as to why I feel this much of arousal and fear? Where does that come from? It's just a test. Objectively, if you look at it, getting a B in a test, it's not a big deal, right? But why getting that B gets an instinct turned on in my mind and body that our ancestors did when they felt a threat for their life because they saw a tiger in front of them, right? So you've kind of got to see as to what it is, what the story is that is getting that fear response switched on, right? So for me, the fear response was, okay, I am not good enough, or I am not smart. And since we live in a world that often so we live in communities, right? There's nothing wrong with having a sense of peeking into each other's lives. Morally speaking, some of us might have tendencies when we do it more often. Some of us don't care, don't bother, because we're just on our own path. But since most of us exist on a spectrum, this tendency to peek into other people's lives and say, okay, that person got an A+, I did not, and that means I am bad, is a learned response. So when that learned response gets activated and you feel fear, your main focus should be to address that source of fear instead of only pushing through, right? So while the pushing through got me through high school and I was able to eventually get better at it, because anything that you put in more time, effort to, you will get better at it. There's no qualms about it. But the cost of getting better at it was that my body and my mind felt really disconnected, right? So I was putting my body through the rhythm of effort, but my mind felt in danger at all times, and that led to a complete collapse in my nervous system, right? A complete collapse in the way how I view the world, because it started, that sense of stress and that sense of fear started to feel so normal, because this is now I'm taking the example of math as something that I have to do every year because it's a part of my life, right? It could be anything else for you. So and it could be something that is very mundane and you do every day. It could be talking to your mother. It could be that talking to your mother just elicits a fear response in you, but this is something that you have to do every day because you live with them. It becomes baseline reality. It becomes a baseline tone of how you live, right? So it becomes so ingrained in you that it is not apparent anymore, but it exists. I love it when I'm able to, kind of cross into themes, and that's just the creative mind taking over. So it's apparent. It's not apparent, but it's there subliminally in your system. So when that happened, that I had the choice to in 10th standard to take up math and leave, I made that choice from a place of fear and not empowerment, right? Because I do not know, I could be a math genius for all I knew if I did not have that fear. We never know. That's a different part. That's a different, philosophical question of who we might be if we hadn't made certain choices. So while I took that choice, life got me through a path that even in medicine, I got fascinated with the process of developing protocols and evidence-based medicine that was again very rooted in data science, right? Again, numbers, statistics. So when I faced that fear again as a grown adult, it got a lot more challenging, because as we grow, our ability to be malleable diminishes to a certain extent, and I think it depends on the person as well, right? I know, like, I'm someone who always jokes around that I keep changing, I keep fluctuating. Hopefully always in a good way, not in a bad way. It's not been that case, but having that sense of flexibility is essential. But if we don't, we kind of start to get more rigid in age, and we kind of make excuses. Like, you might have an old relative or your grandmom, and your parents might always just be like, they're old, they might not be able to understand your ways of life because they're old and they have their own set of firmly rooted beliefs. So I think that's a process that a person usually goes through, right? With more subliminal messages that we have in our system, we try to find more evidence in the external world and external reality, and with the confirmation bias, we kind of accept those subliminal messages as who we are, and that's where the rigidity comes from, right? And this happens so naturally, a lot of us are not aware about it. So I don't really think that this is something we do consciously. It happens on such a unconscious baseline level, and it just goes on for so long, and we're not aware that often we don't get the opportunity to break through it. But the moment you have awareness that, okay, this is something this is happening, and I have control over the process in an internal way, that is, I don't go about and talk to my math teacher and say to her that you are the one who's doing the wrong math and you are dumb and stupid. I don't do that. You don't have an external locus of control, you have an internal locus of control, and you understand, okay, this is a story I'm living by, this is a subliminal message I'm living by today, but is there something I can do, take accountability for, and have the will to create a different story or create a different outcome. So when I was faced with this fear that I had, that I was, I think, around in my early teens, right, 12, 13, 14 till 18, since when we graduated high school, to again having a gap of all of these years while I was going through my medical training, and I was like, now I'm 25 and it's been a while. And when I'm faced with that again, I felt that same level of shock in my system that I felt when I was young, right? So it was a sort of an homecoming, but in a not so pretty way. In the initial time, in the initial aspect of it, it was not pretty, but once I'd become more aware, it got easier. So my journey of becoming aware for that was, I started to look that there were certain courses that I was instinctively doing well at, right? It makes sense, there's no problem. There were certain courses that I knew that I had a visceral reaction in my body, and it was so fascinating that it's in the span of the same day, right? Morning to afternoon, and there's nothing that I'm doing different, right? I'm grabbing a cup of tea, I'm having food, I'm just completing an assignment. Nothing out of the ordinary, right? These just same days, but in just the fact that the context was different. It was a different class. One was more statistics heavy, math heavy, and the other was more conceptual. How I felt in my body changed. I would feel a certain level of stiffness. almost as if my body was screaming, this is danger, no, don't go there, always. And I felt extremely alert, aroused, and even my speech would get really fast, and that is something that I've realized happens to me when I'm a bit more on the anxious end. So like muscles contract, especially in my forearms, and my speech would get really slurry, and I would speak really fast, and there's like a million thoughts racing in my mind, and that would manifest in my body posture and how I felt in my core as well, right? So a lot of times your chest and your belly area are very good indicators of how you feel. This might again change with people, so a very good way of understanding how you're reacting to a stimuli is to come back to that moment. And for some people it is by just taking a deep breath. It is breath. For others it is vision. So you might look around and you might say, okay, I see trees that are barren due to fall. I can feel the cold wind. I don't smell anything right now. It could be your senses, or for some individuals it is just an internal process of visualization. So sometimes also visualizing like a source of light in your belly would help. And it is just trying to redirect your awareness from your external world to your internal world, right? So I started to notice, okay, this is happening to me, that I'm feeling really different in a span of the same day, and there's no apparent threat. These are threats of the modern life. Now I don't have a threat in the form of a tiger in front of me, but I feel the same emotion. So while that was happening, I realized that with that story that was alive again, there are two options, right? Every time you feel a story that has been hindering you come alive again in your body, the two options is to succumb to it, go into that same loop. And I did that for a while. So I pushed harder, studied harder, woke up early, drank more tea. That did not help. That did not help. Drank more tea, and just couldn't realize as to why do I feel pathetic about it, why? And oftentimes when you're so fired up, your sympathetic system also kind of with it's excessive firing kind of numbs you down. So after that extreme like external effort, I knew that okay, now I'm in a phase where I'm starting to numb down. And I was like, okay, now this is not something that I have to fight with. It is something I have to accept first, right? So a lot of times the process includes awareness and acceptance. So acceptance for me came through. So I'm someone who actually likes spending time by myself as well. So I don't find it to be awkward or, problematic, because I know for a lot of us, we love community because that is something we've grown up with. And with my life journey, I've spent more time with myself in patches wherein I had to be on my own, because at that time that journey was geared in that way, and it just felt a sense of peace and calm in my own company. Because again, it depends on the personality type, right? So you might have a different way of processing things. So for me, awareness came through journaling, and that was what part of me was actually scared and why is that happening. And it got me back to, okay, this was a certain memory in my mind that those events actually had a lot more profound effect on me than I thought they did, right? So it's always a good thing when you have a sense of awareness of what you're going through, right? You are aware, and then you acknowledge it. You are like, okay, I know what I'm going through. This is a rehearsed response in my body. And if this is a rehearsed response, a different way of breaking that loop is, in the moment that I acknowledge that this is a rehearsed response, I do an opposite activity to break that association. And the opposite activity would also look differently depending on different people. So the opposite activity for me was, I felt like I am doing math and I feel activated and I feel stressed. The opposite activity for me was to sit down while I'm doing the same work, but listen to calm music, meditative music. So I'm trying to break that association that my mind has made of danger with math. Because I genuinely feel that as humans, we're not particularly different from each other, and that's a very reassuring thing, that if a certain other individual, by comparison, can achieve XYZ, I believe that I too can do that. The process, the duration, the journey might look different. That is where your individuality shines. But I believe we're all born with a certain level of equal ability, but it is just these subliminal messages that are out of our control often. You're not out of our control in the grand scheme of things, and it's not. It could be, if you think about these things with a higher perspective, that these are ways to liberate ourselves, this is a way to feel more freedom, because once I start doing that, I recognized, okay, this is not that scary. And every time I was able to get a particular thing right, I would just applaud myself, because often we have these negative subliminal messages also created through shame and criticism. So what I started doing was applauding myself. And once that came through, my body started to relax more. That meant if I had to give a presentation discussing the data I had and what I had analyzed, I was able to critically think about it in a way that was so calm, and I was able to get my message conveyed across as well. And that loop, that pattern broke. In that moment, that loop and that pattern broke, and I actually felt a sense of freedom, like I'm not bound by this anymore. But this entire process is governed by something I did not talk about yet. This entire process is governed by only one thing: willpower. Because I knew that I was so tired of being feeling so shrunk and so constricted. It felt so suffocating. Like I knew that I desperately wanted to do something about it. So my willpower carried me through. So that made me open to reading things regarding how do you actually reprogram these patterns, how do you actually create a change in yourself. So I researched, I read a lot more, I was more open to suggestion, and with that underlying will, I was able to experiment with myself more, because as I said, what I say might be 100% applicable for someone who has similar personality and characteristics than me, but the message is not lost for those who do not relate to it. It just means that you have to figure out your individual way for the same destination as me. Beautiful, right? Your individual way. So that meant I would experiment more. Okay, I have a YouTube video saying that I should do XYZ to make things better. I tried it, do I have the same response or not? I do not. And one thing about about this process is also patience. Often things might not seem like they're moving, but you have to be consistent, right? So if you're experimenting different things, keep experimenting those things in repetitive loops as well. Even that helps, because it could be like I've tried a new modality today, it did not work for me for the week, but the same modality might have effects over the entire month, right? Depending on how strong that subliminal message you have in your mind, in your body, it might take a bit of time. But if you tell your mind and your subconscious mind in your body that you're putting in effort every day to break it, it becomes more suggestible, because it understands, okay, this is something that is being addressed. I can let it go, you know. So I might cycle through different ways of doing things, different methods of doing things. So that meant some days it might be journaling, some days it might be sitting and visualizing, some days it might be actually getting out of that state of thought and going for a run or going for an ice cream. Even that is a pattern interruption technique, right? So it doesn't have to be the same thing all over again, but the fact that you're putting in effort every day, even with a different modality, will tell your brain that, okay, I'm ready to release this. And that takes will. That takes a lot of conviction and will, because it's easy to stay in your old identity of being a victim in your life. It is very easy to say that I am powerless. And a lot of us feel very comfortable and conditioned to be in that identity. But let me tell you, once it's as small as getting over your fear of numbers and math, on the other end, you feel so liberated, you feel so light, you feel that for once I can walk around this garden that I have in front of my eyes, which is life, and I can actually appreciate the color of the trees. I can actually appreciate the fallen leaves on the ground. I can actually appreciate this nice, comfy jacket, scarf, glasses I have on, this incredible phone that I'm recording this video on. You're able to appreciate things that your brain had shut down or was not receptive to because you were just surviving, because that fear was so active, right? So your journey to being a victim to a victor in your life could be conquering something as small as fear, or could be conquering something as large as, I don't know. At least for me, this phase, it could also apply in different aspects. For example, in my journey to losing weight, it was the same thing. You know, will became a big instrument, because do I sit here at whatever XYZ weight and look at my body and criticize it, or say I accept you, I acknowledge, I have awareness of what my state is, right? So the important process is having awareness. I have awareness about the state I am right now. I have awareness that I'm overweight. I have awareness that I have a fear of math. I acknowledge it and accept it. Because often what we do is, when we only put in efforts in the external world and we do not deal with the feelings, you might achieve that weight loss. You might achieve that A on the math grade. You might achieve your biggest dream that seems on the opposite end of the spectrum of that fear, that might seem like, oh, I've conquered it, but you still feel terrible because you did not acknowledge it. You did not accept that feeling. And the third thing is just take action. Persistently action with having willpower as your base. That's saying that I acknowledge that this is where I am. I accept this state, and I say that I'm going to take action to create a different reality, a different outcome. And while you go through the process, you repeat the steps that the process, you accept that you're aware that the process can be brutal, you're aware that the process can be easy, you're aware that the process can have its ups and downs. You acknowledge and accept it, and you keep taking action. And when you feel you're satisfied and you're at the end of your journey, with that stage also, you have awareness that you made it. You acknowledge that beautiful feeling, and you take that action to committing to yourself daily. So it might be continuing the process, or it might be starting over in a different portion or different area of your life, right? So it could be, so for me, I wasn't always someone who felt a fear of speaking in front of people, right? I enjoyed speaking in front of people, but I'm redoing this process by putting myself out there in the form of video. Now this is something I've not done. So you kind of rinse and repeat the same process in different areas of your life, and you find more freedom and more fulfillment opening up, because I'm almost see, it just, that moment felt like a completion. Like all that I wanted to say was complete. So yes, as I said, you just rinse and repeat. You rinse and repeat this entire process in different areas of life, and you get to experience that sense of freedom. And that sense of freedom is within, right? You feel, and you walk a bit more lighter. You have, when you smile, it's a genuine smile, and it's not, oh, I'm just showing up in the world to say that I'm happy, but I'm not. It's a genuine smile, and it makes all of it worth it. It makes life worth it, right? So I think that's all for today. I don't particularly script them, because I feel restricted that way, and it's a lot more free flowing. But I am more than happy to keep sharing, keep keep being at it, even when I don't find words. Perfect. Thank you. Bye.